This is Roberta Glass, and you're listening to my True Crime Report. So, day 2 of Maxwell's trial. Now, this was a fantastic day for the defense. And I had the horrifying thought that Maxwell might walk. It was so bad for the government that I thought if she walks, then the conspiracy theorists are going to go wild. They're going to call it a show trial. But I will tell you, it will be because of the government, and it will be their fault if they lose it. It will not be a conspiracy. It will not be because of the Comey connections, Comey's daughter being one of the prosecutors. It will be the entire team's fault. Their questions, the way they put on this trial, but one day does not a trial make. So let's get into it. So it started with Larry Vysotsky. I hope I'm pronouncing his name probably wrongly, who was the pilot for Jeffrey Epstein. This was a continuation of his testimony from yesterday. And he was Jeffrey Epstein's pilot for about 3 decades. And this guy, his job was picking up the luggage and dropping off the luggage. So when you have a private pilot, you don't even have to carry your own luggage. They just pick it up and drop it off wherever you're going. It sounded quite nice. And he also put in the home theaters and the sound systems for both Maxwell and Epstein. And he was rewarded for his loyalty with 40 acres of New Mexico land on Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch property. So the government started out today with exhibitions, and these were of Jeffrey Epstein's properties. So they showed some of Zorro Ranch is enormous. And he lived when the main house was being built, he lived in this double wide trailer that he said looked nothing like what you would think a trailer would be like. And when before it was finished in the early 2000s, we also saw little St. James from above. We also saw pictures of Jeffrey Epstein's Gulfstream, which he used in the 90s before switching to a Boeing 727 plane in the early 2000s. And this is what this pilot, he could fly. He flew the helicopter, and we know, and he also flew the plane. So I think the point, and then we also saw an interior of the Lolita Express, particularly the round couch area, which would have these kind of white couches. And you can see beyond the couch area, you go into Jeffrey Epstein's office, which was known as the Red Room because it was red. And then beyond that was a queen-size bed with a bedroom and a queen-size bed, and then a private bathroom. This plane was just enormous. So the point, I think, was to say that look at the wealth, and these girls would have been intimidated by it. But as they're talking about Jeffrey Epstein's wealth, and the defense keeps talking about Jeffrey Epstein's client, Les Wexner. His client, Jeffrey Epstein, never made a trade. Where is this wealth from? So all this wealth is being discussed, but where it comes from, it's just like he creates it out of thin air. It's so bizarre to sit in the court and listen to this testimony and never get a question. I'm wondering if the jurors are thinking the same thing. Where is all this wealth coming from? What did this guy do? He seems like he's procuring nothing but young girls left and right, children. And it seems like he's completely occupied with this. How is he making his money? So it went on. It got a little ridiculous when we went into cross-examination. Now, Christian Everdale. It was ridiculous, but it was a real win for the defense. In some ways, it was slightly ridiculous. So the main point of having him for the government was to place the plane and Maxwell and Epstein at the Interlaken summer camp in 1993, where he met victim Jane. And lo and behold, Larry remembers flying to Michigan, where Interlaken is, right around that time. He can't remember if it was the summer or the fall, but it definitely wasn't a winter month. So it was close enough. So that was a slight win, but then we get into cross-examination, and this is where the defense really made some gains. And this is Christian Everdale, who prosecuted El Chapo, and boy, is he a good lawyer. Boy, is he a good lawyer. And I'm wondering, I thought to myself, is he doing some kind of voodoo thing where I'm forgetting about, he made Maxwell look like the greatest person in the world in this cross-examination. And he took a government witness, and really everyone in the courtroom was saying, I can't believe that was a government witness. That came across as a defense witness. What Everdale did was he started talking about, does he remember Jane? And he says, yes, she had piercing blue eyes. And Christian Everdale said, but yes, you also said you remembered her big breast. And Larry said, yes, she was a mature woman, in my opinion. Same thing for Virginia Roberts. She looked totally of age. In fact, Larry never saw anyone underage that wasn't a child with an adult taking the plane. But all these girls that looked so young to our eye, he thought they were above age. And he said in a deposition that he's not a good judge of age. And that is clear. But the better thing to say is like, look, I needed a job. I knew maybe illegal stuff was going on, but I needed the money. I think it would have been better. It was kind of, when I say it was ridiculous in that way. And when he said they were all mature women, in my opinion, the whole overflow room just exploded into laughter. By the way, really some heavy hitters in the overflow room. Vicky Ward, a journalist who covered this story, was there. Along with now I'm forgetting her name. Hold on. I'll tell you in a second. So let's go through this. And it got to talking about Larry's daughters. And this is where Everdale made a lot of points. He said that he would have never let his daughters alone with Maxwell. Maxwell was a wonderful woman. He really enjoyed her when he was going to helicopter training classes with her. You remember Maxwell learned how to fly a helicopter. And you would think that she did this because she wanted to eliminate as many witnesses as possible with what was going on at Little St. James Island. Seems kind of obvious why she would get her helicopter license, but okay. And he said, I would have never left my daughters alone. I would have quit. I would have reported them. And the government gets up and redirect and says, well, did you let your daughters give Jeffrey Epstein a massage? And he said no, of course. And it was an excellent redirect. But Everdale did a lot of really good stuff in his cross. And you have to remember, Maxwell has a ton of money. She's got a really good team. And it was not apparent in the opening statement, but now you're really seeing what money can do for a defense and some really skilled lawyers, because it's obvious the facts are against Maxwell. She's got a lot of bad facts going on. And that was apparent when Jane, the 14, who met Epstein when she was 14 at the Interlochen summer camp, came to take the stand. Now she's a actress, successful actress, and extremely beautiful. She's using the name Jane to hide her identity, and the court artists weren't allowed to draw her. And she talked about this being at summer camp with her friends and sitting at a picnic table, eating ice cream and just hanging out. And along comes two adults, one tall, thin woman with a Yorkie dog, and she wanted to pat the dog. And you just wonder if Maxwell got a dog for that reason. Now, the government's argument is that Maxwell and Epstein had this, were really looking and searching, like Maxwell would have her chauffeur pull over the car when she would see a child that she wanted to abuse or bring to Epstein to abuse. And that was their MO until they developed what the government calls a pyramid scheme of abuse. So this is the early time when they were still doing this. You wonder if the dog was a kind of prop. And she talked about her situation at the time. Her father had just died the year before of leukemia. Her father's employer had cut off his health insurance without him knowing. So when he got sick, it completely bankrupted the family, which consisted of what she called her manic depressive mother and her two brothers, and that they were living in a friend's pool house in Miami at this time, at 14, because they were just so destitute. And here comes Jeffrey Epstein. So after they meet at summer camp, he asks her for her number at summer camp. She gives it to him. And he calls her about 6 weeks later, and her mother gives her the message, and she has a meeting. Jeffrey Epstein invites Jane and her mother over for tea, which must have been the most bizarre thing. She said she went over, and there was in the backyard of the Miami mansion, there was this sandwiches set up and tea cakes and tea. And the whole thing lasted about 30 minutes. And Jeffrey Epstein made a pitch that he was a patron of the arts, that he loved dance and music, and and told her mother that her daughter was so talented and he could help her. And they were impressed, and she started going over there. And Maxwell became what she described like a sister to her. And then this abuse started, and it became really very hard to listen to graphic testimony of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse of her. And he abused her alone. He abused her with Maxwell, and he had these kind of orgies of children, of other children over with her, all around in Jeffrey Epstein's. The orgies took place in Jeffrey Epstein's bedroom, and she described a moment when she was staying over where someone came and got her and said, Jeffrey Epstein wants to see you. And she said her heart sank because she knew she didn't want to go, and she knew what that meant. And I think what will be difficult for the defense is to try to make Jane look like a liar. She's obviously a very truthful witness, but this is where the government really messed up. They started asking questions that I wasn't sure they knew the answer to. They were asking questions: how many times, how often would you say you were with Jeffrey Epstein and Maxwell was there? And she would say, I don't know. I can't remember. I can't remember the other people that were there, the other children that were there. And with no real explanation given, I think the defense will exploit that. And they kept asking, how many times was it more likely, what was the most likely scenario? And she said, well, the most often I was alone with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, that's good for Maxwell's defense. Secondly, it was an orgy situation. And thirdly, it was Maxwell. I can tell you that Maxwell was with Epstein more than twice. I don't know why they asked that. Obviously, all they needed is once for a successful prosecution, but it looked bad. Don't ask. If it's not that often, don't ask. Don't bring it to the jury's attention. It was, and you have a team. So you have the defense team, which is made up of Bobby Sternum, Christian Everdell, Lauren Meninger, Jeffrey Peluccia. And then you have the defense, the government, made up of Pomerantz, Comey, Allison Moe, and and one man who I'm forgetting the name of right now. And they look like teenagers. They have these real small voices. They look insecure. They don't look confident in what they're saying, and they did not have a good day. So right at the end, Laura Meninger started to cross-examine Jane, asking her. Oh, actually, let me go for a little further and tell you a little bit more about Jane. She talked about being flown places by Maxwell and Epstein, and she talked about being flown sometimes commercially, sometimes by a private plane. And there's Larry Vysotsky again. And they showed the jury pictures of Jane when she was 14, 15, 16 years old. Now, this relationship went on. Jeffrey Epstein paid for her to go to the high school, to the Professional School of Children in New York. And this relationship went on into the 2000s, almost a full decade, about 9 years. And and Larry never saw anything. He remembers her, but he thought she was an adult. It just doesn't make any sense. And she talked about in 2002, she realized she could not call him back when a boyfriend pointed out she was calling him her godfather, that she didn't have to call him back right away. And she describes Epstein getting more and more upset and leaving these kind of nasty messages that she should be grateful for what he did for her. And she said she started to get real symptoms when he started making the news of remembering the abuse, and it was a really difficult time, and it's affected her relationships. And she has gotten $5 million from the Epstein estate payout. And so the cross-examination, Laura Meninger asked, why did you wait so long to tell your story? And then she started to go into where she lived. I think where she's going is she's going to try to make it look like Jane's a liar and her destitute family situation wasn't that at all. And it was much better, because she described Jeffrey Epstein putting handfuls of hundreds in her hand and saying, I know your mom's having a hard time. Don't worry about it. And I think where Laura Meninger is going is saying it wasn't that at all. So that's where we ended off. So do people have questions? The government's claim are at work to free Ghislaine. I don't feel like that. I really do feel like the government's trying. They are outmatched. They are outspent. I don't know. You have to remember, Maxwell still has all that money. I don't feel like this is a show trial. I don't feel like this is I think they had a really hard day in court. And I think what was obvious was that Larry Vysotsky still feels extremely loyal to Maxwell. And that came through. And I wouldn't have kept him on the stand so long, frankly. I think the longer he was on the stand, the more he became a defense witness. I think what you really wanted to do, show the plane, show the opulence, and pinpoint him for that interlocking plane trip, and that's it. Get him out of there. But Everdale, holy cow, if I have the money, if I'm ever in trouble in New York, that is someone I would call. Excellent lawyer. This is about free Ghislaine via mistrial. I haven't seen anything. The judge is very careful about all her rulings. Again, lots of long conferences in chambers with both attorneys when there's an objection. She seems very careful about her ruling. I think it would be hard to declare a mistrial here. I don't think it's on purpose. I just think they had a bad day. I think they had a bad day. I think this trial, they have 4 victims testifying. I don't know what kind of preparation they had with Jane, but it just didn't seem like they had worked out the kinks. And it'll be very interesting. Unfortunately, tomorrow I can't go to court, but it'll be interesting to hear what happens in cross. It will be a very, very interesting continuation of cross tomorrow. Right. That's a good point, Bishop, that they stripped as much as they can from the trial. So they have certain constraints. This goes from the 90s to the 2000s, to the early 2000s. And we have the superseding indictment, and we have the original charges of perjury and the superseding indictment of trafficking. I think it's interstate trafficking. So you're right. It's very narrow. But for people who want to hear, the defense, of course, brought up all the celebrities that flew. Prince Andrew was brought up, and there was kind of like a gasp in the courtroom for a second. And we thought maybe Prince Andrew was going to be gone into, but he wasn't. Chris Tucker, really the question, I mean, if you're going into this trial thinking that a lot of deep questions are going to be answered about who Jeffrey Epstein was, who Maxwell was, or were they CIA? Were they some other kind of international spy group? What were they just in the were they into blackmailing people? Were they in the blackmailing business? You will be disappointed. This is not going to be a trial to expose Epstein, and it's not going to be a trial to fully expose Maxwell, just because they have to work within the law and the evidence that they have. Now, I think also you could argue, did they rush to prosecute Maxwell before they could fully investigate her? I guess you could argue that. Then came the superseding indictment. We thought there would be more, and then there wasn't. So it's interesting. I did not know that Bobby Sturman was also Tarlatelli's attorney. I did not know that. There's an interesting article. She's a New York lawyer. I think she's as far as I've seen so far, she seems to be the weakest one on the team. I think all the other lawyers are outshining her so far, but you never know. She may have her day. And the government, tomorrow's another day. I hope that they regroup and they buck up. It's very, it's exciting to see 3 young women sitting at the government's table prosecuting Maxwell. Maxwell again was she reminds me of the Menendez. She's really the Menendez brothers wearing all these sweaters. I guess it's cold, but she's wearing another light colored sweater. Yesterday she wore a white boat neck sweater. It looked almost like the same sweater. Don't know if it was or not. We were wondering if it was maybe a little bit closer to a light brown tan than white. but she looked exactly the same. She looks fantastic. Everybody was remarking how good she looks. And we're asking, where are these hair patches that her brother is talking about? Where is this weight loss? If anything, she looks like she might have gained a few pounds if the food is so edible. So she has a good PR agent in her brother, I guess. Virginia Roberts doesn't look like she's going to be a witness, at least not by name. Annie Farmer is going to be a witness. Maria Farmer's sister is going to be a witness. She's using her full name, so I can say that. Rich people love beige. So, yeah, there's 4 witnesses, and Jane did a fantastic job today. As far as being believable and honest, but could the prosecution have sealed it more? Absolutely. And they could have done a lot better job with both witnesses today. But I hope that it goes. The idea of Maxwell walking is truly terrifying. I'm going to close this out. If I'm going to keep it short and sweet and not run on forever. If anybody has any other questions? Okay, so I'll be back in court tomorrow. I have a doctor's appointment, so I can't go, but I will be back in court Thursday, so check back here. And if you like my work, please support it. I'm the only podcaster that I know of covering this trial, so if you appreciate in the courtroom coverage, please support my work. All right. And have a great night, everybody.